we need to be like the palms. Let the storms come, but stand strong. It's time to stand up and say, I believe in being a father, being a business owner. I believe in entrepreneurship and allowing people to believe that you can overcome anything, and stop limiting people by race or where you were born. Your problem isn't where you were born, where you're willing to go.
Listener, this next guest that you're going to listen to by Marvel. Marvel is creating a superhero hero character about this guy. That's a first for me. I collected comic books as a kid, and when I found out he is working with Marvel and there's a superhero named after him and everything, that's pretty badass. So James Dixon is our next guest, and he is a keynote speaker. He has over 1.4 million subscribers on his YouTube channel. So we get into how he built that and how you can as well. It's such a really cool story that he's going to share. So Andrew, what were some of the highlights for you coming into this conversation with James?
Oh man, Superman is for real. That is the fact. And, James has an amazing story. If you're not familiar with him, he lost one of his legs. And so, he has this incredible story that you're going to get to hear. And ultimately, he's just a true inspiration because he never let his disability define him. And he's always, competed against people with both legs, right? And he goes off and can squat over 700 pounds and does some crazy stuff. He's just an incredible human being. And not only that, I mean, he's just inspirational. He's very, very well-spoken and clear about, exactly how to package concepts. And I don't know, I left feeling on fire just from this conversation. So if you want some motivation, today is the day. He is going to give you a shot in your arm for sure. So I know you're going to enjoy this episode with Superman himself, Mr. James Dixon. Enjoy.
Welcome back to the Better Than Rich Show. I'm Mike Abramowitz. I'm here with Andrew Biggs, and we have our first ever superhero on the show today. James L. Troy Dixon, welcome to the Better Than Rich Show, brother.
Man, I'm honored to be on this show with you two iconic brothers. Is great.
Well, we're really looking forward to this. Eric Woolwin made the connection, and his podcast. We had Devin on the show. We recently interviewed Lila, actually right before we had a conversation with you. And what a great family. And they just Eric sang your praises, and we've been really looking forward to this conversation. So I am curious. You have such an epic story, and many of our listeners know who you are. But for those who don't know who you are and what your story is and how you became this superhero, I know it's a new name and something that you're kind of like working through right now. But could you give a little bit of context? Because obviously I don't think I'll do the story much justice. I'd really love for you to be able to explain that.
I think this is great. So I was born with a disability. And that thing was a thing that plagued me and kept me from being able to be active and do what other kids do, as simple as walk, run, any of those things, until I was 11. I had 33 surgeries that culminated in the amputation without me knowing it was going to be an amputation. It was like having a private funeral and no one else attended it with me. So I woke up and I'm struggling with the adaptation to it. But once I adjusted, I decided I would play sports to prove that I could do everything that everyone else does, because I wanted to prove my mom wrong, because she was the one individual that said, son, you're a cripple. You'll never be able to do anything. So I had to prove mom wrong and prove others wrong, and then get that echo out of my head and heart. My grandmother told me that I was a superhero and that I was just dealing with kryptonite. All my life, there was a Superman something, whether it be from the belt buckle, shirts, T-shirts, whatever it might have been. The necklaces, they were all gifts from my grandmother. In fact, my watch even is Superman. Everything was that, with the idea that no matter what you've gone through, you're prepared and God will use it in some way to turn you into something great. And then a year ago, I was reached out to me by Marvel, a cartoonist, and said, we want to go into a superhero. We think you're of overcoming, becoming an athlete, being as strong as I am. My deadlift is 760 pounds. That's even with one leg. And I've only competed against able-bodied people. I've only finished Indiana of me now. And so becoming a superhero started because somebody believed I was one.
Mm.
And I just want to make sure I heard that right. You said you deadlift what'd you say? 700 what?
760 pounds. My combined push-pull, that's deadlift, squat, and bench, is 1620.
All right. Yeah, I think Superman is for real, Mike. We are in the presence of a real life superhero right now. I mean, this is incredible, James, and thanks for sharing your harrowing story. I mean, right off the bat, I love this contrast, right? Of like, here's what mom said and here's what grandma said. Here's what the world told me. Here's what I chose to believe. What was that like? Was that a battle, or did you just like always embrace this? Like, what was that wrestling match like in your mind?
I got to tell you now, and thank you for asking me that, Andrew. I was thinking about the day I decided I would use basketball as the way to prove that I was able-bodied. So I went out to try out, and I can remember going out for the team and not understanding all that was entail, all the lateral movement, all the things that I did not have perfected at the time. And trying out for it, and the first time they cut me, it hurt. Every time I got cut, I had to come back bigger, better, stronger, because I wasn't fighting to make a team. I'm for acceptance. So when you ask, what was it like? It was like having all the rejection turned into acceptance, but it was personal acceptance. Probably the biggest change for me was trying to get rid of those sounds, those negative thoughts, images, and all those things that have been said about me, and then try to create a new image of what I could be. And so every day every time I tried out with a team, I was trying to overcome whatever objection. Coach, why didn't I make it? Coach tells me. So I improved my cardio. I increased my strength. I worked on my lateral movement. And then I came back a beast. It's all about that conversation I had with myself. I didn't want to be labeled as a cripple. I wanted to be labeled as incredible. And so I chose that path.
It's interesting when I hear this, because I grew up playing basketball too, and kids can be really, kids can be cruel, man. And, I was the fat white kid on my team, the only one. And it was, I had my nickname, call me Snacks, they were kind of, they were picking on me a little bit. So how did, was that the case for you at all? Did you have to overcome some of that on top of everything else? I mean, if you could speak to that a little bit, I'd be curious.
Look, I had kids that would took a sock, took a stick, and put it into a shoe instead of found a leg because I wore it with me. But then, so the way that I decided to overcome that, and this sounds crazy, brother, but I had a mentor by the name of Ray Colbert. He was Mr. Indiana in basketball, won a championship with Isaiah Thomas at IU, drafted, played for the Lakers, won a championship. He lived in my hometown. His mother went to my church and made him teach me basketball. And he told me the secret when you have a physical disability limitation is intensity. And so when kids were cruel, kids would say stuff to me, I would just match it with such level of intensity that it had that borderline violence fight atmosphere. So it was easier for them to be quiet than to face my wrath. So I was able to kill a lot of that negativity by going hard.
We had Nick Santonastasso on the podcast. I don't know if you know Nick. He's born with the listeners, you could check out his episode, and he was one of our first guests that we had, and I asked him the same question I'm going to ask you, is because we even interviewed his mom too, because I think I asked her this question about like this concept of disability and like handicap and just the words. I think sometimes the public doesn't necessarily know what's considered correct or not correct, or what to say or what not to say, and they kind of just like clump people up together and try to categorize them versus like. His response was something like different bodied versus like, or different abilities is I think the way he said it. I just have different abilities, not disabilities. Is there any like type of counsel that you might offer to potentially the ignorant public that don't want to be ignorant, or to a listener that says, I don't want to call people disability or disabled or handicap if they don't want to be called that. Like if they're just of different abilities, or I don't know, if you could just speak to that just a little bit before we kind of go in a different direction. I'm just curious on your take on that.
Brother Mike, I'm going to be a little different in this. I don't want to be labeled as anything. I want to create my own category. I wanted to be, I didn't compete in the Paralympics or anything, Special Olympics or anything by design. I wanted to go against able-bodied people and have no excuse given for my performance, my behaviors, for anything that I was lacking. If you beat me, it's because you beat me. I didn't give myself any outs. For me, I represented the name of my family. I represented myself. I represented my faith. I represented everybody that was an overcomer. And whether we realize it or not, even full-bodied people, you know, yourselves, right? Even you have aches, pains, problems, and things. So all of us have a limitation. I just choose to live life without limitation. So if you want to ask me, Jonathan, all of us are differently talented, differently skilled, differently abled. And so I'll echo what Nick said. Yeah, I'm just differently able.
Yeah, great answer. And I love that, you know, that mentality to just be resilient and say, hey, everyone's got their challenges and I'm going to respond to, you know, my unique circumstances. One of the things I'm curious about, you referenced this very particular thing, becoming a man at the age of 13. I'm curious, what does that mean? And also, I mean, what's interesting for me, we actually just booked this. I was planning on doing it a little bit earlier, but my son just turned 8, and we are going through a little bit of a rite of passage. We have a weekend camping trip. You know, it's now booked. It's official. We're going to go through an official sort of rite of passage. Now, I think it's different at 13 than it is at 8. So we're probably going to do it again later when, you know, the real puberty hits. But I'm curious from your side, becoming a man at 13, what does that mean to you? And why is it such a poignant thing that you like to point out?
For me, it was major because it signified the idea that I had ended all my disabilities. I had only learned to walk a year. I had only been walking a year. And I had just taken all the training wheels of life off of myself by then. So riding skateboards, playing sports, doing everything I saw every other kid do, but I wasn't able to because I was sitting on the sidelines and watching. I was known as the crippled kid on the porch, but now there was a man inside of me that wanted to show up and show that I wasn't going to be limited. The rite of passage you're going to do with the 8-year-old, allow them to have some sense of self and learning something, the joy of being the first time they ever did anything, whether it's learning how to skip a rock or whatever. Make that a milestone moment. Make it matter. Make it a big moment. And I mean, it'll be a lasting moment in his life.
Well, what I'm so inspired by, James, with your story is you took this different ability, as we established, and turned it into a gift that has now influenced millions of people. And I don't believe that every person chooses to do that. I think some people have their different ability and they become a victim, and, you know, they become, oh, poor me, or they, you know, want handouts, or they just kind of settle for less. They come up with excuses. You obviously haven't done that. What I'm curious on is, what would you say to someone who maybe they are just stuck? They know they have the potential to get unstuck. They see your story. They see stories like Nick. They see stories of all these other, you know, able-bodied people with different abilities, and they see themselves having their own like pity party. But they're like, I know I'm meant for more. What would you say to help them get unstuck? To help them, you know, to transfer your confidence into them, to help them begin to get, you know, just to get started with something. What would you say to someone like that?
Well, you asked the right person. I'm probably the one person that sees more disabled and amputees than anyone in the nation. I see more than 130 full. What? So even now, I'm sitting in the parking lot of a hospital. I just went in and visited 17 people who just lost their limbs. And I went through and I had this message for them. I realized that my call is to be a spark plug for the will. Because I hid the fact that I was an amputee because I wanted to prove that I wasn't. But when I did that, I was putting the mute button for all of them. I'm a voice for them. So is Nick and other people. But I am that echo thing that goes into their lives, and I've created those absolute motivation videos where I include all those amputees in those videos. And I tell them, you are not a victim. This is your victory lap. You see, your life was just boring before when you had all your limbs. Now that you've lost the leg, your chapter just became exciting. You get to become inspirational and impactful, even just by getting up and standing. People would cheer. You taking your first step will be bigger than the first step you took as a baby because your family celebrated the first step. This other step, you can motivate a whole nation behind it. So when I speak to them, I tell them about how unique and wonderful you can be, even with a disability. If I stay a victim, I'll never know victory. If I only try to get a disability check, I'll be limited by using all the other senses and talents that you have. You are more than the sum of your parts. Lose some, find your purpose.
I love it, man. And anybody listening should be inspired by that. And what is your listener, as you're listening to this right now, what is the thing that you think is holding you back? That's the exact thing that makes your life interesting right now. That's part of your story that you now get to overcome, that you get to be an inspiration for, that you get to preach and move on and help others with similar challenges, overcome the same. So whether it's losing a leg or it's something that happened in your family or something that happened in your life or something that happened with your business, whatever it is, find something that you think is what's holding you back and flip it on its head. I love that, James. Thank you so much for that. You have your book coming out soon, man. Obviously, we're going to give you a chance to plug it here at the end, but I'm just curious, what are the main principles? What are the main ideas behind this book found? And, what do you like to kind of speak to in that book? And obviously, why should people check it out? But I know it's destined to be a bestseller at this point, but what would you say? Like, what are the ideas in that book that you think are the most profound?
I think the only thing that's profound about my book is this. It's not about me. It's about learning the techniques and tactics to overcome. It's about the self-discovery of a young boy going through a changing time in our culture. I faced racism. I faced abandonment. I faced father walking away. I faced my mother not believing. I found out that you can build your own tribe, and that challenges that you face, everything that you go through, actually will build you into something better. You have to go through something to become something. So the book talks about that. So the book is not something I'm pushing. I really am pushing the encouragement. What we are doing right here will touch many lives. The book will be there. It's an echo of my previous comments. It's things I'm going through, but I'm constantly evolving and growing, even as I'm talking to you. My life is amazing, and the things I get to do. And I count this moment, this milestone here. The book tells about how I got here, but where I'm going, that's a whole nother story,
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, and I do want to hear more about where you're going. But I just, one little thing about the past. You faced racism. You faced ridicule. Can you talk about that a little bit? This is a show where we get into anything and everything, man. So what's your take, on racism, on, do you believe in systemic racism? Do you not? And what was your personal experience like? Because I think so often we talk about it in the abstract. So what would you say to that?
I'm gonna tell you the most unique stories. The first time I ever heard the N-word, I was 3 years old. I was in a hospital and a nurse called me that word. I didn't know what it was. So when my grandmother and mother appeared at the hospital, I said, "There goes my N-word, mama." And they said, who said that to you? And so they go talk to the nurses and all that stuff, because whoever was taking care of me wasn't doing a great job there. That overnight shift, for them to teach me that phrase, the first time I heard it. When I was a teenager, though, here's my view on racism, and my answer is this. There was a kid accused of saying the N-word. And all the guys, that were black on the football team decided they wanted to beat this kid up for allegedly making this racial remark. The kid they wanted to beat up, though, any of us could have beat him up individually. Now, there was a huge kid that was a country-fed, 6'6", 300-pound white kid. He said, "I said it before. Is that a problem? I'll say it right now." But we knew it would probably take at least 10 guys to deal with him. He was going to be a handful. And they were like, he gets a pass. But this little guy, and they jumped on this guy, and they started to beat on this little kid. And I jumped down and laid my body on top of him to protect him. And people said, you're a sellout. Why would you protect him? It's because I knew that this kid didn't say that. He was just being picked on because he was capable of being beat up. The other guy who was actually saying it, they didn't want any part of it. So I've stood up against racism, whether it comes from black or white. Racism is wrong, and no matter who does it, right? And this thing of like feeling like that there's such a thing as systemic racism. The only time the race comes up is when we bring this thing up here. Because in my life, I found that inspiration goes beyond your color. Inspiration goes beyond where you grew up. Who I am. I touch lives no matter what race is around me. We talk. They hear your story, and the story transcends. And only when I'm in America does anybody even call me a black. And the rest of the world, they call you American. They just pick up on that. But here, people try to divide us. And I've worn the badge of titles all my life and fought against them. I won't be a cripple. I'm not defined by being black. I'm defined by being James. I'm here to make an impact. The only race that I care about starts with a G, and it's grace. I've been given it, and so I give that. And I've seen the most racist people made certain ideas and found out that there was some story behind them where they were hurt as a kid, they saw something, and then I give them the other side of the coin. You can change a life by not feeding into that. If I get rejected from a job, Mike, it's not because I was black. It was like whatever it is that God didn't want me to go through that door, so I could find out that there was another path for me.
Well, thank you so much, James, for that. I mean, just such a great answer, and the uniqueness of the stories, and you just opening up about your experience has been awesome. And again, I think it all ties into your main philosophy, which is I refuse to be defined by anything. I refuse to be a victim to anything. And that message needs to be amplified more and more in a culture where it seems that victimhood is almost like a currency. And it's like, okay, I want to get my victim points, and I can use my victimness, my victim story to get ahead. And you are rejecting that wholesale. And I just really appreciate that. So thank you.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of listeners that listen to this show too are a lot of business owners, entrepreneurial types. And what I find fascinating is that this audience specifically, they typically have a decent like self-talk where they don't like kind of let the environment around them kind of dictate or determine, but their inner talk sometimes, man, it's sometimes worse than the outside world. The outside world is saying this stuff that they're like, oh, you're so great. And they're in their own inner dialogue telling them how bad they are, or, why they can't do something, or here's all my limitations and whatnot. And, one of the things that I'm really impressed by is you took everything, your message, your situation, your circumstances, went out and helping people, but then you created this tribe that you mentioned and this following of other people that are just advocates for everything that you are doing and everything that you are done. I would really love for you to just riff on this. Where did that start? What's the origin story of starting your tribe, getting your followers, getting people to like want to, join in, lock arms with you, and turn it into some, maybe, I don't know if I'm assuming you turn it into some sort of profits or business for yourself. And because that's a lot of people who listen to the show too. So I would love to hear that origin story of how you attracted this followership,
right.
And let's hear it.
You're going to love this one. So here I was. I had been on the phone, and I was listening to someone as I'm driving to the gym. And they made a negative comment about, God's going to expose people, da-da-da-da. What you do in the dark comes to the light. And just hearing that rant of the person bothered me. So I was getting out of my car, and I start to record as I'm walking into the gym. And it's dark, but as you get closer to the gym, there was light. So I used this opportunity to share this point. And this is the moment that gave birth to Absolute Motivation, our YouTube channel. So I'm walking, and I go, what you do in the dark will come to the light. Most people think that means in a negative sense that everything you've done wrong will be revealed. That God somehow wants to show the world how flawed you are, but that's not what it is. You see, a new day begins at midnight when it's still dark, when no one else can see. You've already got a second chance to start over in the dark. And the work you do, the private work you do, building of your character, building of your business, the long hours that no one sees, that thing you do in the dark will show up in the light. And when that shows up in the light, your name will be in light. I said that little 19-second clip or whatever. That got grabbed. Next thing I know, millions see that. And then I end up with the YouTube channel that takes off. We go from maybe 70,000 people subscribed to maybe 400,000. Then it was 700,000. Then it was 1 million. Then it was 1.2 million. And then 1.4 million. And I saw us go from passing Les Brown, soon maybe past Eric Thomas, Amy past Tony Robbins, triple him in views. And you're like, how did that happen? You see, I was building something that was bigger than my own name. If you go to the channel and you're looking for, you go Tony Robbins, you find him, he puts on something and he's not there, and it's Tony Robbins event, you'd be disappointed. But when you go absolute motivation, that's a movement. So people resonated with me because I created a movement, grabbed a tribe, developed a team that we could bring information to people and close the knowledge gap. The reason why most people don't access greatness isn't because they're not motivated. It's because they're not inspired. You see, inspiration is something breathed into you. It's how you took your first breath. It's how God made man. We need that. So when you're in a neighborhood, you enter manhood neighborhood, that's a collection of people. You're not an island, not a lone wolf. I join a pack and I bring a pack with me. And when we're done, there's nothing left.
I got to jump in real quick, Biggs, because this is the second time I heard of that midnight content. Tim Grover, I remember hearing him talk, Michael Jordan's coach, and he that whole concept of midnight starts, the new day starts, and it's still dark. But you actually said it better than him. And I was like, so that's why I'm smiling over here. And because the first time I heard it, I was so inspired, but the way you just explained that is so beautiful and eloquent. And at the same time, I'm thinking, well, I said some really good shit, and I didn't get 1.4 million people to back me. And so there's a piece of me that still wants more of like, okay, that sounds motivating. You built this brand, you have this cool identity, and the absolute motivation kind of stuck. I get it, but man, I feel like there's some tactical stuff in there, James, on growing these followers.
Look, let me tell you, here's the step by step. I literally started off. I got acknowledged because of that. The guy calls me up and asks me if I'll come speak to his business. I go to a hotel and he's got 6 people there. And I spoke to them as if it were 6 million, but I pour my heart out to those 6 people. They all happen to be C-level guys. It was a mastermind group. And when I left there, they were calling me saying, can you come to Vegas? This, that. They all had different locations they wanted me to go to. And so I did my first the second speech I ever gave was to a national company of about 700 people in a room. And then it just began to build this momentum. And as I began to build the momentum, different people would come along and tell me, hey, have you considered this? Did you monetize that? And I'm like, well, no, because at first my purpose was high, but I wasn't thinking about profit. Then I learned how to incorporate both. And so I could monetize it. I could teach others and grow their social media, whether it be YouTube especially. Show them the tactics and ways that we grew it. Show them the relationship and how we could help them do it. So everything began to line up together. And we worked together to build everyone up. And so I just took people and personally mentored them up. And I've seen them aspire. And then I got invited to the Secret Knock where I met Eric. And it went to a whole new level.
That's amazing, man. I mean, and as people who are in a similar space and building our channel, albeit way slower at the moment, it's inspiring. And I might even, I don't know, maybe we'll have to have an offline conversation here because, I mean, it's sometimes it's even, there's these, little idiosyncrasies. It's like the tags and the thumbnails and the titles and the description and all these things, man. I mean, have you gone that far, that deep into this world, or do you kind of just let other people on your team handle that, or how have you handled that?
So my team consists of 3 people. We have a guy that does the editing, but we have one guy that's just a tremendous intellect and creative director with me. And so the 3 of us come together, and we've created a formula, if you will. And it not only worked, but it allowed me in 10 months. A year ago, on the 24th of this month, today is the 31st. On the 24th, it was a year ago, I was working at a factory. I was still there. My revenue stream from doing YouTube allowed me to walk away from a $123,000 guaranteed job, right? Any notice. I burned that bridge right then. I hugged everyone. I walked out of there. And since then, I've never looked back. Now, I'm booked for the next 4 years. I have an engagement coming up on June 9th and 10th that I've invited Eric and the entire team, family to join me. I have 7,000 people that are already waiting. I only have to mention it on my Instagram, and the event comes. So not only would I be able to help you guys, I love the way your chemistry is between the 2 of you. You get Mike and Drew better than Rick. There's something to that, and I just think more people need to hear about it. But I'm honored to even be here with you.
Yeah, well, we appreciate that, and thanks for seeing that, James. And of course, we'll welcome all the help we can. We've worked through our barriers internally about receiving from the universe and from others. So we'll take you up on that offer for sure. One of the things that I'm just struck by, James, is just like your charisma and like your capacity to package these concepts into like really hard hitting, beautiful sound bites that are memorable. Is that something you've learned? Is that something you've practiced, or have you just always been good at that? Sometimes I feel like I make a good point, but it's like it's lost in, what I could have said in 30 seconds, I said in 2 minutes. Like, is there something to that? Like, teach me your ways, Jedi Master.
I will promise you this. My training ground was different. As a child, I had to sit on the porch. I wasn't able to go around. I had so many surgeries and recoveries and all that I used to sit around senior citizens, and they would be real quick with their words and say different things. My grandmother would use these terms you have to grow into them, right? And so she would say something like, you tore your drawers. And I'm like, what does that mean? And so I'm looking at my pants, but that's not what she meant. She meant, you showed out in public, right? And you revealed yourself. And so those little quick things and communicating kind of trained me in life to be able to say things in short time, keep their attention and move on. So we can definitely do that together, brother.
Fantastic. I love it. Yeah, thank you for that.
And I want to hear your riff on this. It was very much an understated mention, but you mustered up the courage to walk away from a guaranteed 6-figure position because you saw something, you saw some results, you saw possibility. I mean, there's some people that maybe they see these possibilities and they're not ready to burn the boats and just walk away from the guaranteed for what's possible. Can you speak to that? Like, what did you get counsel for this, or did you just trust the universe, or like, yeah?
Man, so for me, my burn the boat moment was when I realized that here I could take care of my wife and children. I know I would have to burn the bridge, and when I did so, that it would offend some people because my family got me, and I was 3rd generation in this job. I worked 12 years to get into the position where I was guaranteed life would be easy. All I have to do is coast for the next 30. I didn't want to coast. I couldn't sleep at night. I was bothered by my purpose. I was bothered by, is this supposed to be all that life is? Just getting the check, getting the job. If I'm guaranteed 6-figure and I can possibly move up, all I have to do is continue to be excellent day in and day out at managing the mundane stuff. I don't want to be average. I wanted to be great. I wanted to do something. I wanted to have purpose. And so what I did was I leveraged it. And though I would be losing maybe $50,000 initially, day one, I bet on me. I put all the chips in on me. I put all the chips in on the fact that I wouldn't let the family down. I wouldn't let myself down. And if I could work that hard 12 years for someone else, free myself from the slavery of a check, and go out and earn my freedom.
I want to hear about the family. I know you mentioned your wife and your kids. What with you being who you are, I think especially, you know, Marvel's talking with you. You got a superhero. Superman is real. How are you? Tell us, you know, a little bit about, you know, the age of your kids and whatnot, and like, how are you guiding them to not feel intimidated by who their dad has become, and like while raising them? And, you know, I want to hear that, because we're both family men. I have a 2.5-year-old, James, and Andrew has an 8-year-old. And what is Gabe, 2? Is it, well, right now? You know, about a year and a half now. So I'd love to hear just the family side of it too.
All right. Well, first of all, I'm impressed that Andrew didn't go, he's 28 months or 26. Well, you know that weird thing. It's like year and a half. Thanks. Right? So
yeah. I don't know if my wife has graduated yet. I'll send her the memo though that 18 months is the limit. Okay, it's a year and a half, people. Right? You heard it here on the Better Show. It's a year and a half. Stop with the month stuff. It's over. Okay. All right.
So here's the thing. So I had this intensity. I wanted my daughter, especially she's my oldest, she's 25, and then I have a 17-year-old and a 16-year-old. They're Irish twins. For 3 days, they're the same age. And somehow the baby boy is taller than the middle kid, who's James and Jeremiah, their names. So Keziah, James, Jeremiah. Keziah is 6'3", and you know, maybe 220 pounds herself. She takes a lot after Dad, right? And I only celebrated that they all had legs. That was the biggest moment for me. I just, as much as I've accomplished at that stage of life, having them, I couldn't wait. I didn't care about gender. I just wanted to see that they had legs. And when they did, I was like, God, thank you. Man, they don't have to go through what I went through, but they get the benefit from what I became. And so my daughter, you're talking about the intensity and all those things. My daughter once came home and said, Dad, he told me everything's possible. I can do anything, and yet they won't let me. They said they won't. I can't be a flyer on a cheerleading team. And I didn't know about cheerleading. I didn't know that they had different positions. I thought cheerleading was just one term. And so she was like, I think it's because they just don't like me. And I was like, I know what it's like, babe. I'm going to school and I'm going to complain. It's like, my daughter needs an opportunity to try out for cheerleading. They said, sir, she's on the team. I said, but she's saying that you guys won't let her fly. And they were like, yes, your daughter is about 100 pounds heavier than the other kids. So she has to be the base. She can't be a flyer. And she's like, Dad, you told me I could be one. And I was like, I tell you what, what do we have to do to let her try to be a flyer? They said, well, if you can get other dads to be a part of this and you hold her up. And I was like, then if that's what my baby girl wants, let's try it. So then I tried it, and I realized, babe, you know what? The base, now that's the position. Because holding her up at 20 pounds on your hand was not going to happen. So you asked me, what is it like? It was like realizing that sometimes life without limitations means adapting. That doesn't mean you can do everything. It means that you can, the desires and gifts that you have, you should follow your own path. So my kids, they're extremely proud of me. I'm extremely proud of them. And they love, you know, seeing the impact. They love seeing the reverence, respect. And, you know, I love the fact that I've never had to physically discipline my kids. I've only had to talk with them, you know, and that if I show disappointment, you know, in something they've done or whatever, it's been enough. But that's because I've been an active dad, because I didn't have one. So hats off to you guys. But I grew up in a community where only 19% of the kids had a father of any kind. And so I determined that it wasn't going to be a generational curse breaker, all that. I just determined I was going to be everything I was supposed to be. I was going to be the father. I was going to be the leader. I was going to be the son. I was going to be the impact person. Man, I live it all out. And so hats off to both of you guys, you know.
Yeah. Well, James, I love that. And I love the story. And I love just the question. What is it? What would it take? What might it look like if we were to try to have her be a flyer? And then also just this practicality that you're bringing where it's like, yes, I want to marry this, ask every possible question and challenge every single possible assumption while also saying, hey, we all need to live our lives and truly pick our battles. Like, what do I really want to overcome? There's a pathway. Like, anything is possible with the appropriate strategy, but you got to make sure you're up for the challenge if there is a roadblock that hits. I'm curious. One of the things you mentioned, obviously, you go around, you speak a lot. You also, are a self-proclaimed, advocate for amputees, right? And I assume for prosthetics or for something in that vein. What's it like, as you address these folks, and what does it mean to be an amputee advocate? I assume you also work with a lot of veterans. Could you speak to that a little bit, just to give us a little glimpse into that world of these amputees? Who are these individuals? What are their main challenges, and how do you support them?
So it's a great question. So the way when I grew in prominence and people began to know about me, prosthetic companies from around the country would contact me. And then it became nurses and doctors who would contact me because I've had situations. One I can talk about is like a kid named Marcus. And he said, I got a phone call from a doctor and they were like, hey, if Marcus doesn't do the amputation, he will die. He'll go septic. And he doesn't have a family support system. He's a kid. He's 24 years of age. Diabetes is destroying his life. He moved out of his care, and his poverty has led to poor eating. And the poor eating fed into the diabetes, which fed into getting a scratch, not be taken care of. It leads to infection. Now he's going to lose his leg. But he refuses to. But if he doesn't, he'll die. And so they asked me if I would come. So I canceled the trip. I come to the hospital. I'm sitting beside him, and I tell him, I don't want to live in a world that doesn't include you. I need you to stick around. And he was like, there's nobody going to be here for me. Nobody loves me. I said, when you go into surgery, I'll be here. When you come out, I'll be here. And then I begin to tell him about what's possible and help him find his voice. Show them through my personal example, if I can do it, you can do it. And once they see an image of what they can be, the limitation goes off. Usually I leave a room and people are inspired, like, all right, I want to do it. Put me in the game. And I'm like, the moment you're ready, I sure will.
This is really powerful, James. I wanted to hear from you. We seeded it on what's next. Like, are you looking to level up this amputee advocacy even more? Is this something like taking that message and taking these talks to even more audiences? Like, what is it that you're focusing on during this next chapter? Your kids are getting older. You're going to be empty nesters soon. It seems that way. Like, what's this next chapter for James looking like?
Well, the next chapter for me looks like this. The advocacy I'm always going to do. I've committed myself to this. I impact lives, and I will continue to do so. I respond to that. I demonstrate for them things that are possible. I respond to maybe 1,400 messages within there's just I get a ton of messages. I got 1,400. I still have to return because there's so many people read out to me individually. So I go and I'll go to like the Georgia Society of Orthotics and Prosthetics. It's where I get to speak to all the people that make prosthetics in a state, and I'll speak to the people that make the legs, and then they go back with the message. So I'm doing it at bigger windows to reach that crowd. But that's something I do from the heart and always will. But as far as what's next for me, I've got a documentary coming out. I'm working on some major things that are going to be coming. The Joyful James character that Marvel's coming out with is inclusive, nonviolent, that show kids with disabilities you can do anything. I'm proud of that. That's coming out to impact young kids. The book will come out, and I promise you it'll inspire many. But I'm also developing a tour where I'm taking my own team. Tony Robbins and those guys are phenomenal. Les Brown, their impact echoes, but they are getting older. And so I'm building a tribe where I bring in new speakers that have a different message other than mine. And I take them around the world and touch people in a whole different point. I'm taking what's in a mastermind, the things that you would learn, and how they bring in experts. I just take it on tour. I already have a great number of people. I'm just picking great people to go in front of them.
Well, we love what you're up to, man, and it's so important. And I mean, just the everything about this story is super cool. And in some ways, what's really exciting, James, is it's still just the beginning in so many ways.
Oh, yeah.
And of this movement that you're creating. And I have no doubt that of course, you're known by so many, but there's just something about your message and the quality of your resonance that just tells me that you're going to be a household name, relatively soon. So keep up the good fight, man. We always ask our guests 3 questions before we head for the exits on the show. The first one is, what do you think the world needs most right now?
The number one I think we need people of impact and character, people morals that will stand up and speak. Instead of us bending over and allowing people to say whatever, we need to be like the palm trees. Let the storms come, but stand strong. It's time to stand up and say, I believe in being a father, being a business owner. I believe in entrepreneurship and allowing people to believe that you can overcome anything, and stop limiting people by race or where you were born. Your problem isn't where you were born, where you're willing to go.
That's great. The second question, James, is what are 1 to 3 books that you think people should read? Obviously, including yours, Found, that will be coming out. We'll plug it in just a moment. But what are 1 to 3 books that you feel like people could read right now?
Now, let me tell you. Any books by Eric, Devin, Ethan, any of those books will be life-changing. What that guy is doing with his family is amazing. To turn your kids into entrepreneurs, instead of trying to have them become young rappers, basketball players, football players, the odds of making it out are small. But being an entrepreneur, man, you open the door for many more than you. And so that's a book. Any book by any of them. That's how I'm going to put. And 3 Feet from Gold by Greg Reed, my buddy. That's a great book as well.
Awesome. Our final question, James, is what does it mean to you to be better than rich?
It means that all the sacrifices that were made so that I could be here, not in vain. My grandmother died before she ever got to see me do this stuff. And so I work every day to make sure that when I'm done with this rap and I'm buried beside her in that grave I've already purchased, that I hear well done, not only from God, but also from her. You see, many sacrifices were made so I could be me. And maybe she's like Walt Disney. People say he never saw Disney World, but then others say he saw it first. And so I'm fighting this battle. And so when I end, after I'm done being the man in the arena, the applause I'll get is well done.
It's really touching. And I mean, just thank you. I was even getting a little emotional just hearing that about grandma. And thanks for sharing, man. That means a lot. Where can people learn more? Obviously, you have all these platforms, but what's the one place that you want to send them, or a couple places you want to send them if they want to stay in touch, if they want to pre-order the book? Because I sense that a lot of people will want to.
Well, we're honored. First of all, go to Absolute Motivation. That's my YouTube channel. There, every day, man, I pour out a collaboration of the greats, and I'm included in that because I pour myself out in there. I promise you'll love it. So Absolute Motivation is a YouTube channel. If you want to follow me personally, it's Superman is Surreal on Instagram. I respond there to everything. If you want to reach me, you can do it there. But you're someone like that wants to speak, you want to develop, you want to be a part of that. I don't have anything where I'm charging you thousands to do anything. What I'm looking for is just people who have a purpose that can make an impact and have a plan. And I'll work with you. I'll put them on both platforms, with the YouTube and traveling. Man, I'm just building a tribe. So I'm coming at this completely authentic. And I want people that are the same way. Purpose and understanding that you make a profit from it. I don't chase profit. I chase impact.
And they should connect with you on Instagram as well.
Absolutely.
If anyone's interested in that.
Come on, do it, man.
Well,
I'll big up you.
Well, James, this has been really incredible. Eric built you up, and I was like, I don't know, Eric, we've had some good guests, but you really brought it. So he, really appreciate you and authentically showing up for our guests and these listeners. And Andrew, again, always great questions and insightful. I absolutely love having you as my business partner and co-host of the podcast. And guests, we really appreciate you joining in, listening to the show. And assuming this episode helped you, as always, it's your turn. Help others, share with a friend, subscribe on YouTube, leave a rating and review. And as always, remember, leave today better than you found it. Till next time.